Hi folks. This is my third video in reference to that documentary which I now call a fakeumentary, the Main Battleground of the Comfort Woman issue, by the producer or filmmaker Miki Dezaki, and I apologize if I mispronounce his name. I call it a fakeumentary because when he interviewed me and others that agree with our version of the Comfort Woman issue, we were told that the film, the fakeumentary, will have both sides of the issue. Those of us explaining our side and those explaining the South Korean side from the peninsula there. And we figured, okay, it'd be in the middle of the road and it'd be left up to the viewer to decide. Well, this gentleman, he had a disreputable reputation, and we were aware of it. And we thought perhaps we can accept his guarantee and let the viewer decide. We forgot to realize that you can't change the spots, that a leopard cannot change its spots. And I've got some notes here on this fakeumentary, and I'd like to review them with you, what takes place in this fakeumentary, and then my counter to it. Remember now, it's the middle of the road. He doesn't take sides, so he says. Yet, early on in this fakeumentary, he labels us historical revisionists and denialists. Now wait a minute. Historical revisionists and denialists, that's a pejorative. That's a negative term. But I thought he wasn't taking any sides here. It was left up to the viewer. Yeah, left up to the viewer after he labeled us historical revisionists and denialists. Now the other side, presenting the Comfort Woman issue as promoted from the Korean Peninsula, no negative terms in reference to them. No positive ones, but no negative ones. Only for us. That's me. I'm an historical revisionist and I'm a denialist. Me. Now he does start off rather in the middle of the road to draw you into this further. He said that the Comfort Woman issue, as explained from the peninsula, they could not provide any documentation, in other words, for them being forced into sexual slavery. And he said that the Comfort Woman USA side, meaning myself and others in Japan, we could provide documentation because we have the documentation from the National Archives that they were well-paid prostitutes. And then he said that the testimony of these Comfort Women in recent years has been rather inconsistent. So you see, right from the beginning, after he calls us historical revisionists and denialists, he seems to take the middle of the road. Then he takes a fast shift towards the peninsula. He said that there was a rally, and at this rally, I forgot what it was, that there was no Korean nationalism or anti-Japanese sentiment. It was a rally, I guess, in South Korea in reference to the Comfort Woman issue. No nationalism, no anti-Japanese sentiment. Then he goes on and he says that 204, now remember, they're saying there was over 200,000 Comfort Women during the war. 200,000 sexual slaves. And he says that 204 of them came forward during the 1990s. And he says today there's less than 30 of them alive. He said that the Comfort Women suffered physical and psychological pain. Their suffering continued after the war. The South Korean Comfort Women were seen as unworthy to commemorate the reason for their silence after the war. Yeah, they were unworthy to commemorate because they were prostitutes and that was the reason for their silence. Really? Is that what it is? Now make it ridicule for this, what I'm about to say. Prostitution in Korea is an honorable pursuit, an honorable profession. How many times do you see on the news prostitutes gathering together to protest for some sort of rights or wages or whatever? And also at one time in Korea on the peninsula, prostitution was a government job. So what are you talking about over here? An unworthy commemoration. You know what was unworthy commemoration? that you volunteered your services for the Japanese Imperial Army. But he doesn't say that there. It goes on to say that this professor in South Korea, she wrote a book. And she said, and she wrote a book, and she had difficulties in South Korea. She was even sued because the book that she wrote differed from the views being promoted from the peninsula. How dare you disagree with us? So they took her to court for slander, and she lost, the poor lady. Then he asked South Korean students who were camped around the Comfort Woman statue across from the Japanese embassy in Seoul, South Korea, their thoughts on Japanese people. Now, their reply was in Korean, so I really don't know what they said. Then he asked Japanese students in Korea what they thought about the Comfort Women issue. Then there's a professor in California, Professor Mira. He's Japanese and he's taught at a university in California. And he took this issue to court, the statue of the Comfort Women issue in Glendale, California. And he said that Professor Mira is the leader of a revisionist group. Yeah, he's an historical revisionist. Now let me explain this to you folks. He was a professor at a university in California. Could you get more liberal than that? That's the epicenter of liberalism, and the whole universe is in California. So if he was truly an historical revisionist, would he have been able to survive in that university? I don't think so. His occupation contradicts what the producer claims about him. I've met Professor Mira a number of times. He's an honorable man, he and his wife. He's no revisionist. He's just seeking accuracy like the rest of us are. Then he interviews the former mayor of Glendale, California. Glendale, California is the municipality where they erected or placed a Comfort Woman statue in a city park. And he was being accused of taking money from Koreans and Chinese. Well, he interviewed that mayor at the time. And the mayor says, nah, I never took any money from the Chinese because of this. Really? So you really expect him to get on camera and say, yeah, the Chinese paid me up with a whole lot of money. That's why I favored the statue. Are you stupid? Is that valid? Now, he said he never took any money. Now, I'm going to have to believe him. He may not have taken any money as under the table as a bribe, but his campaign contributions, I would suspect there was a whole lot of it from the Koreans, because if you've ever been to Glendale, California, there's a whole lot of Koreans there. It's a sizable voter block in Glendale, California. That's how the statue got placed there. And they could legally donate money to a campaign. That's legal to do that. But he said, I didn't take any money. Yeah, like he's going to say, yeah, the commies came and gave me money. Yeah, sorry. Then he goes on to say the revisionists have been targeting English speakers by creating websites. In other words, we revisionists have been targeting people who only speak English with our historical denialism. That's what he said. Okay. Then he targets Kent Gilbert and I as being revisionist. Yeah! Now the reason why in this portion he mentions Kent Gilbert and I as being revisionist is because Kent Gilbert and I together, we wrote a book. This is the book right here. And because of this book, that makes us revisionists. Now this book, here's a shameless plug. You can still get this on Amazon Japan. So please, order the book. Anyway, the reason why we're revisionists because of this book is because of the hideous title of this book. You read the title of this book and it explains why we're revisionists. The title of the book is Inform Japan How Amazing It Is. Yeah, we wrote a book to let the people of Japan know how two foreigners, even though Kent is living in Japan many years, married, has children, fluent in the language, reading and writing, but how two foreigners see Japan, and we illustrate how amazing the country is to us. So that makes us revisionists. Huh? Yeah, revisionists to their negative theory about Japan. Then Then he goes on to say that the revisionists, meaning us, we've had setbacks in our campaigns in the U.S. I didn't know we had any campaigns in the U.S. But he's specifically mentioning a group that was counter to placing the Comfort Women statue in Glendale, California, and in San Francisco, that they were unsuccessful in those endeavors to stop that. Then it says that the historical narrative evidence has the potential to convince Americans. You hear this? The historical narrative, meaning it's undeniable, right? And evidence has a tendency to convince Americans as to the version as we're promoting. Yes, because we have volumes of evidence, whereas the side coming from the peninsula has zero documentation to their side of the story. Now let's go to page 2 of my notes, 2 of 4. Alright. Then he had a Korean explain how the 200,000 number was derived. 200,000 number being, they're claiming that the Imperial Japanese Army had over 200,000 sexual slaves forced into servitude to work in the concubines as comfort women. Yeah, over 200,000. Well, now they asked Kent Gilbert about that. And Kent Gilbert explains it's not a realistic number, because they're claiming at the same time these 200,000 women were forced to have sex approximately 25 times a day. With an imperial army of 1.5 million, that would have meant they would have been spending a good portion of their days having sex. Gee, is that why they lost the war? In other words, Kent explained that number of 200,000 and the number of times they had sex a day does not hold up to scrutiny. Alright? Now, then he goes on, the revisionists don't know how the numbers were derived. We being the revisionists. We don't know how the 200,000 number was derived. Oh, yes, we do. Well, we don't know how it derived, but we know where it comes from. The Korean Peninsula. Those claiming to be victims of the Japanese Imperial Army as sex slaves, they're the ones saying, there was over 200,000 of us. That's where the number came from. So we took that number, put it in with some other numbers, and it doesn't stand up to scrutiny. And it says revision. Okay, now they dispute the fact on a statement made by Congresswoman Amira in Japan and others that because of the Comfort Women statues in Glendale, California, San Francisco, Brookhaven, Georgia, children of Japanese ancestry are being bullied at school. And they're saying, no, that never happened. You're just making that up. Really? I spoke to a woman who knew of a child in Brookhaven who had to deal with this incident. All right? Brookhaven, Georgia. So that woman wasn't lying to me. Okay, now. When mentioning the Comfort Woman issue, it questions why we keep bringing up the Comfort Woman created by Koreans in Vietnam during the Vietnam War. Comfort Woman created by Koreans to serve the American troops from about 1950 for a 40-year period. In other words, you're just bringing up the Comfort Woman of the Japanese Imperial Army, but you don't bring up the issue of the Comfort Woman created by Korean soldiers themselves. Why not? If you care about sexual servitude on the whole, you should bring it all up, right? But he goes on to say, and the only reason why we bring that up is because we wanted to detract from Japan's responsibility. We don't want to detract from anyone's responsibility. As a matter of fact, we want someone to add their responsibility. The Koreans add their responsibility and the complicity of creating Comfort Women in Vietnam and in Korea itself. Then he goes on and he says, well, the South Korean consulate in Vietnam is taking care of these women and compensating them. Okay? So that should solve the issue right there. In other words, we don't have to bring up what the Koreans did, only what the Japanese did because of the compensation. Well, if that's the case, then why are you bringing up the Japanese? Because they have been compensated, the Japanese compensated Korea in 1965, and then a few years ago they compensated them. But yet they're still only bringing that up, and if you bring anything else up, you're just trying to hide from your responsibility. Okay. Then here. At a Korean YMCA? At a Korean YMCA in Tokyo, there was a bunch of people demonstrating outside who were anti-Korean of some sort. So he's trying to connect us with that group. Really? Well, they were the really? You're trying to connect us with that group? They were the anti-comfort woman demonstration in front of the Korean YMCA in Tokyo. First of all, I did not know YMCAs were specific to certain ethnic heritages. Here in the United States, there's a YMCA. Anybody could walk in there. I didn't know they were specified for certain genders. Apparently in Tokyo, there's one just for Koreans, and there was an anti-comfort woman demonstration outside this YMCA. So right away, all of us who don't agree with the Peninsula's version of it were guilty for that demonstration. I didn't even know that demonstration existed till I saw this film. So sorry, you can't connect us to something we knew nothing about or promoted. Then he mentions the Yasukuni Shrine. Now the Yasukuni Shrine has nothing to do with the comfort woman issue, zero. But the reason why it was brought up was because it's a contentious issue with the South Koreans, or all the Koreans, and China. So that's why it was brought up, to play on the emotions of the Korean viewers of this film. Now, he goes on to say about the Yasukuni Shrine that when Prime Minister Abe went to the Yasukuni Shrine, it was equivalent to the Chancellor of Germany going to visit Adolf Hitler's tomb. Huh? See, you could go to the Yasukuni Shrine. You know where you cannot go to? Adolf Hitler's tomb. It doesn't exist. It was around 1970, whatever was the remains of Adolf Hitler in his group, the Soviets crushed him and then spread the ashes, or whatever they did with it, into a river. So they didn't even know where the remains of Adolf Hitler is. So how could the Chancellor go to that tomb? So there's no equivalence there. One, it doesn't exist, and two, the Yasukuni Shrine had nothing to do with the comfort woman issue. But that's irrelevant, right? Alright, what he does, he then compares the Yasukuni Shrine to the USA's Arlington National Cemetery outside of Washington, D.C. And he says that, it's okay for U.S. presidents to go to pay their respect at Arlington National Cemetery, but it's wrong for Prime Minister Abe or other Japanese politicians to go to the Yasukuni Shrine. And the reason for that is, well, because Arlington Cemetery outside of Washington, it's a secular cemetery, no religious cemetery, and it's on public grounds. Whereas the Yasukuni Shrine, it's a religious institution on private property, so no Japanese politician should go there to pay their respect. You see? He comes from, the narrator, the one who put this together, from California, I think California, but from the United States. He was born and raised in the United States with Japanese heritage. And in the United States, they're trying to expunge religion everywhere in this country. So if you're associated with religion among these liberals, there's got to be something wrong with you, and you need to be marginalized because of that. And that's what it is here. Now, the Yasukuni Shrine has nothing to do with the comfort woman issue, but it's a contentious issue among China and South Korea. He goes on, then he says that, yes, the Japanese apologized in the past for the comfort woman issue, but those apologies were moral apologies, taking moral responsibility, not legal responsibility. You mean there's a difference? If I punch you in the face and then I apologize, was that a moral apology or was that a legal apology? What was it? It was an apology. Don't divide it among one group or another. You either accept the apology or you don't accept the apology. Don't say, gee, he apologized, but it was a moral one and I wanted to make a legal responsibility. How the Hades do you make a legal responsibility? What he's doing is disqualifying past apologies, soliciting further apologies. Then, he tries to compare past compensation by the Japanese. What he said was in 1988, President Ronald Reagan signed into law compensating Americans of Japanese ancestry during the Second World War that were interned in camps. He said, well, if we did that, the United States, why shouldn't Japan do that with the comfort women issue? First of all, they did in 1965 and recently. The Japanese get money. But there's no comparison between the two. You speak to any American today and mention to them about about Americans of Japanese ancestry being interned during the Second World War, almost all of them would say that was not correct. Almost all of them would agree that compensation was valid, and most of us would say it wasn't enough. Now you talk about the comfort women issue, on both sides of it, one side would say, yes, they need to be compensated again and again and again. And the other side would say, wait a minute, they were compensated because they were well-paid prostitutes. They don't need to be compensated again. It's a division there. Whereas with the Americans of Japanese ancestry being interned, currently there is no division. So please, don't try to make a comparison there. Now, this part is the best part to me in the whole 2-hour film, and it should have ended right here. About midway into the film, the fakeumentary, he shows an actual bank account with all the money in the bank account that belonged to one of these comfort women during the war. Wait a minute, I'm a sex slave and I have a bank account? I'm a sex slave and I made all this money? I'm a sex slave and I go into town to open up a bank account and make deposits? What the Hades kind of a sex slave is that? Showing that bank record there, that should have invalidated the rest prior to the movie, this documentary or fakeumentary, and everything afterwards. Right there, he proved the point. He says that there's no documentation proving that they were forced into it, that we only have report number 49 showing that they were not forced into it, but you got this bank statement here. Reasonable deduction would tell you. Okay, where is it? Did I just miss it? Okay, there it is. Then he goes on saying that the opposition to the Korean Peninsula's version of the story is solely based on the U.S. Army Report 1944, report number 49, where the United States Army captured, not rescued, captured some comfort women and stated that they were well-paid prostitutes. And he says it's solely based upon that. Really? Is that what it is? No. It's not solely based upon that. Now let me tell you something. If it was solely based upon that, that would be sufficient, because the other side has no documentation, zero documentation. But not only do we have report number 49, Shun and I went to the National Archives in Washington, D.C., outside of Washington, D.C., and we came across volumes of other documents supporting this position, that they were well-paid prostitutes, that they were recruited, and a lot of the comfort stations were run by Koreans themselves. We have those documentation, but he doesn't mention it. No, just 49, and that's not sufficient. Oh yes, because it's a sole document. That's not the sole document. It's the only one you make reference to. Okay. Oh, 1977, Japan, in their junior high school textbooks, added the comfort woman story. Then in 2012, it was removed. And wants to know why it was removed, and it was very questionable as to why it was removed. But he doesn't mention anywhere in there what appears in the South Korean textbooks in reference to this issue. How come that's totally omitted? I thought we were going to be right down the middle of the road on this issue. Yeah, the middle of the road. Okay. Then he goes on that Japan is ranked number 72 when it comes to press freedom among the world. In other words, there are 71 countries in front of Japan with greater press freedoms, because Japan is number 72. Now, what this has to do with the comfort women issue is absolutely zero. Once again, to discredit Japan. But this report comes from a group called Reporters Without Borders. And I'm going to prove to you how this report is false. Absolutely false. Ranking Japan number 70-something. I don't know where Japan belongs on that list, but not down that far on the list. Because they rate the United States as being number 48. That's right, there are 47 countries in the world that have greater press responsibility than the United States. Now, I'm not going to say we're number 1, all right? I won't say that. But I know we're not number 48, and this is how I know this. Just take the last 2 years, for example. The vast majority of newspapers and news outlets daily promoted the lie about President Trump. Daily promoted the lies coming from the Democratic Party. On a daily basis. So if we were number 48, how come that wasn't suppressed? How come that was allowed to continue? Because we're not number 48. Now, President Trump called them fake news, the enemy of democracy and all that, but that he did not suppress them. No attempt was made by the government to suppress all this derogatory, inflammatory, false information. So I don't think we're number 48. Another instance, how I know that Japan, what is that number again? Is that number 72? A couple of years ago, a rapporteur from the United Nations went to Japan to investigate how there's a lack of freedom of the press in Japan. Yeah, there's not freedom of the press in Japan. Japan suppresses the press. And you know how he did that when he went to Japan? You know how he investigated it? You know how he reported on it? He held a press conference in Tokyo. Wait a minute. If you're holding a press conference about no press freedom during a press conference in Tokyo, didn't you just invalidate what you're doing? No press freedom in Japan while he's holding a press conference. And it says that the comfort women statue is so important to Prime Minister Abe and the right wing. It's important because it's a pure form of Japan bashing. As the chief executive of the country, that's his role, is to protect his country. Then there's a portion with NHK, which is the public broadcasting company in Japan owned by the government. And then in one of these episodes or one of these viewings, they had a tribunal of people in reference to the comfort women issue. And the conclusion of this tribunal was the following: that the emperor, in reference to the comfort women issue, the emperor knew or should have known of the comfort women system. He failed to do his duty and as such is criminally liable. Yeah! Remember, he should have known. So that holds him criminally liable. Not that he didn't know, but he should have known. How ignorant is that? So Prime Minister Abe pressures NHK to edit the video, or edit the whatever that thing was called. And that's called, you ready for this? Suppression. No, it's not censorship, it's quality control. What do you mean he should have known, so he's criminally liable because he should have known and he didn't know? I don't blame the Prime Minister for pressuring him on that issue. Next, then, they discuss a young lady that I met in Tokyo in 2015, and she was a proponent of the comfort women issue from our perspective. Now, why she's in this, I have no idea. She's given an inordinate amount of time in this fakeumentary, which contributes very little to either way. So I'm thinking perhaps she gave money to the producer for the development of this fakeumentary. She spends a lot of time talking about a reporter or a correspondent from America that she contracted with to write articles to appear in the American media in reference to the comfort women issue from our perspective and the difficulties she had with this gentleman as far as money was concerned. A lot of time is spent of her discussing that. But then she brings up the reason why her view on the comfort women issue turned. It also says here that she was on the scene in 2015 but primarily left from there. Was that before or after I met her? Well, anyway, somebody showed her irrefutable proof of the Nanking Massacre in China, I think in 1937. Irrefutable proof. How did someone show her irrefutable proof of the Nanking Massacre in China, where the Japanese are accused of killing hundreds of thousands of Chinese people? Did the ghost of Christmas past come and take her to Nanking back in 1930, whatever, to show this irrefutable proof? Yeah, it was the ghost of Christmas past that did it. And as a result of her seeing this irrefutable proof, she no longer could hold reliable the view of the comfort woman issue based upon our perspective. That makes totally no sense, but it makes sense to the producer to put that in the film. In addition, go on, he shows me explaining about the paper bag that I brought with me to the Comfort Woman statue in Glendale, California, where I state that in America we say something to the effect that if you're going to have a sexual relationship with somebody and that person's ugly and not attractive to you, you put a paper bag over the person. So we brought the paper bag to put on the ugly statue. Never gave the background to that statement. Where that comes from is the government U.S. Army Report number 49 from 1944, where the American Army interrogator of these captured comfort women, he wrote in his report that they were not attractive by either Caucasian or Japanese standards. In other words, they were ugly. And that was the reason why I brought the paper bag. Never mentioned it. He did. Then the narrator goes on to claim that proof of our racism is because we state how special the Japanese people are. So that makes us racist. We don't say that the Japanese are better than anybody else, or everybody's worse than the Japanese. That would make us racist. Saying the Japanese are special people, that doesn't make you a racist. We say that we talk about American exceptionalism. That doesn't make us racist. Let me tell you why the Japanese people are so special. When Commodore Perry visited them in the mid-1800s, it took them out of the medieval period to modernize. Within a 30-year period approximately afterwards, they modernized so advanced. Now remember, they were just a medieval country then. So advanced that their military was able to defeat the Russians. Teddy Roosevelt had to intervene to save face for the Russians. That's why they're a special people. The Second World War ends, the country is devastated. No mass land for farming, no resources to speak of. Yet after that devastation, they rose to become the #2 economy in the world. And you're going to tell me they're not a special people? That needs to be illustrated, and we illustrate that to them because they are special. Doesn't make us racist. Now, he talks about Colonel Shun-san, my good friend of about 10 years. He says, Shun claims he is not a racist. He said, but he found on Facebook, it was written in 2013, that Shun wrote the following. They are really scum of the earth, meaning the Koreans, in response to someone who wrote, Koreans are such pitiful, ridiculous plastic beings. So Shun responds with his comment. Totally taking out of context what was written prior to that. Now, I do not know what was written prior to it, but I'm going to guess it was something to the effect that they were writing about some Koreans being critical of Japan, so naturally they're defending their country. Some Koreans promoted that false narrative about the comfort woman issue, so naturally they're being defensive of their country. He totally didn't report what caused this exchange to take place. Now, I've known Shun for approximately 10 years. Every time he said something negative about Koreans to me, it was those Koreans who were critical of Japan or those Koreans promoting this false narrative. I never heard him blanketly saying, all Koreans have mud on their face. All Koreans are lowlifes. Never heard that. So to accuse him of being a racist in that respect, that's false. That's just fueling the flames of criticism coming from the peninsula. Then he attacks Mrs. Yamamoto. I've had dinner with Mrs. Yamamoto in Tokyo. I went with her to the UN in Geneva and in Paris. She's very active in this comfort women issue, promoting the narrative from our point of view. And that's why he attacked her. He marginalized her. She spoke at the UN in reference to this. She submitted documentation and books to the UN in Paris in reference to this. So she has to be criticized. She has to be marginalized. Well, she's nothing but a racist according to this fakeumentary. She's an honorable person, not riddled with emotion, very rational, riddled with facts. Then he goes on to state that the reason why there's no historical documents from the Japanese military in reference to forced servitude, because a directive came from Tokyo during the war that they were to eliminate any documents that would harm them in foreign relations-wise. So as a result, documents were destroyed. By his own admission, he says 7% of Japanese wartime documents were destroyed because of this directive. 7%. Meaning 93 was still left intact. 93%. The U.S. military and the Allies captured these 93%. That's why they were able to hold the war crime trials in Tokyo, causing some to be executed from that which was not destroyed. So wait a minute. You're destroying government documents, army documents. You're not going to destroy the ones that are going to cause one or two of you to be hung? I don't think so. What's going on here is any retreating army, the Americans did it also whenever we were retreating. You burn the documents that you cannot carry with you because you don't want them to fall into enemy hands. That's a military action taken by all militaries. So when they burned 7% of the documents, that wasn't anything sinister. That was a military action. And how come, so what you're saying is the servitude portion of the documents, those were the ones that were left intact, but yet the ones left intact also, which caused some of them to be hung, that was okay to be left? No. Sorry. Can't go there. It doesn't make any sense. Then he goes on to say, oh, here it is. Japan is being held responsible for not following an international convention that it did not approve or participate in, where other nations did. There was an international convention that other nations signed on to and participated in. Japan didn't sign on to it, thus they did not participate. In other words, Japan is to be held responsible for not signing a convention and then for not participating in it only because other nations participated in it. Do you see the lunacy here? What was that even doing here in this film other than to vilify the country? Then we got right over here saying that the Chinese have nothing to do with this comfort woman issue being promoted from the peninsula. Nothing to do with it at all. Really? Nothing to do with it? Hotani? Brookhaven, Georgia, a couple of years ago, they placed one of these comfort woman statues in a public park. And there was a dedication ceremony there. I was at the dedication ceremony. Colonel Shun-san, he was at the dedication ceremony. You know who else was there? One of the former comfort women. One of these well-paid prostitutes were there, giving a heart-wrenching story on how she was victimized by the Japanese during the Second World War. Now, I question this one's testimony. I don't know about the others, but this one's testimony I question. Solely on the basis she's a communist. Now, where do I get that from? After the Second World War, she goes to China. I don't know what she did while she was in China, but she rose up to become an official in the Chinese government. You only become an official in the Chinese government if you're a communist. If you're not a communist, you don't become an official in the Chinese government. She is a communist. So now they dragged this communist to Brookhaven, Georgia to give her testimony, and I'm to believe it? Like I've always said for years, never, ever trust a communist. This young lady. This lady is admitted communist by stating she was an official. She stated she was an official in the Chinese government. I didn't research it and find it. Came right out of her own mouth that she was a communist official, telling me right then and there she's not to be believed. So don't tell me the Chinese aren't involved when they're sending one of their officials here at a dedication ceremonies, or she was once an official. Now, when this whole thing started by the interviewer, we knew of his questionable background, but we still agreed to participate, and we were all interviewed, not together, different times in different places. He never submitted to us the questions beforehand, so we did not know what questions were going to be asked of us. We knew the topic, but not what questions. So we were not able to prepare, and that's okay. We do not have to prepare because we are quite secure in our knowledge on the topic that we do not have to prepare anything. We knew we were not going to stumble, but he deceived us by telling us it was in the middle of the road. And I could speak for myself, and I could speak with Colonel Shun-san, and I'm sure Kent Gilbert and Mio and the others in there probably would agree. We are willing to discuss this, debate this with anybody, anywhere in the world, and would be glad to illustrate to you the rationality behind our position. We would be glad to show you the volumes of documents and videos, film we have supporting our document at this position. At the same time, I would like to see your documents, which you do not have. I would like to hear your stories, which are inconsistent. We thought this would be a fair fakeumentary, but it wasn't. We should have realized a leopard cannot change its spots. Alright, some of you may be wondering by now, how did I get these 4 pages of notes on this fakeumentary? These are my notes. I took these notes. So how was I able to do these? Did I view the fakeumentary when it was released in Busan, South Korea? Did I view the fakeumentary when it was released in Tokyo? Or as I would like to think, perhaps it was the ghost of Christmas past that took me to a special viewing of this fakeumentary. Alright folks, we'll see you. God bless you. God bless America. God bless the nation you happen to be in. And God bless our good friends and trusted allies in the land of the rising sun, Nihongoku, Japan. See ya!